Say that with love.
Black communities deserve clean water and subsidy crop specialties so Black children can just be, and be abundantly, not redlined out of green space, not poisoned by profit margins or fenced from generational land, but seeded into policy as stakeholders, named in the land deeds, not just the data.
Welcome to Say That With Love, where we reimagine Black childhood with legacy, liberation, and love. I'm your host, Dr. Leah Austin, the president and CEO of the National Black Child Development Institute, also known as the president of the Black Children. Let it be known that in this space, we love Black children unapologetically and out loud. Air is breath. Water is life. Clean air and safe water are love. And yet, many Black children do not have either. So if Black children do not have access to these most basic resources, we must ask, do we truly love Black children? And this should not even be a question. I think about my son's former early learning center in Southwest Atlanta. It now has a gas station directly across the street and sits less than a mile from I-75, a major highway. Imagine children, 3 and 4-year-olds, playing outside, breathing in fumes from the gas station and pollutants from the thousands of cars passing by every day. And that's just air quality. In rural communities from West Virginia to Alabama, families are still filling jugs of dirty water to drink. The data confirms what we see and what we feel. Nearly 2 million Americans live without access to running water or indoor plumbing. In 2023, approximately 130 million Americans lived in counties where the air did not meet EPA standards. These realities remind us that clean air and clean water should not be luxuries. They are rights too often denied to children. Today, we are focusing on something that seems so basic, yet is so often withheld: the right to breathe clean air and to drink safe water. Environmental racism continues to shape the health and future of Black communities, from polluted neighborhoods to unsafe drinking water. These harms impact how our children grow, learn, and thrive. Joining me is Binta Dixon, an Afrofuturist, a writer, editor, and community advocate who weaves storytelling, heritage, and civic action into powerful visions of environmental justice. Her work spans advocacy, education, and art, always rooted in the belief that clean air and water are essential to child's wellness and community liberation. Together, we will explore how pollution in our air and in our water harms our children, and how our communities are fighting back with imagination, resilience, and hope. Binta, welcome to Say That With Love. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dr. Austin. So happy to be here.
Awesome. We are so happy to have you, and so happy and excited, quite frankly, to dive into such an important conversation. So I want to begin by asking you, when we think about what it means to breathe clean air and to drink clean water, what does that mean behind perhaps the science that people might think of?
Yeah, when I think about it, I think about the right to breathe easy, to relax, to be our full selves. And without access to these basic things in our lives, it can become a challenge. I think about me growing up in North Carolina and not understanding that, because my family lived close to this meat processing plant, that we were not only smelling, but we were breathing in these toxic fumes that they were potentially getting into our water. So I think about the parts of our lives and our stories and how they evolve alongside this kind of toxicity. But I also think about the joy that comes from the country, that comes from these spaces too, and that cannot be erased and that cannot be undermined even by the toxicity and the climate issues that we face.
Absolutely. So maybe tell us a little bit more about your journey and how it led you into environmental justice.
Well, I started in community-based programs. I was studying social anthropology and in Miami, feeling really disconnected from my community. I grew up very community-centered, right? My parents, both community-centered folks, always doing things for the church or in different community spaces. So when I went to graduate school, I was feeling very isolated in my studies. I was learning about environmental issues. I was learning about all these things, but I wasn't really engaging with folks. So I decided to start volunteering at an organization, and that became my first nonprofit job at a small organization in Liberty City, Miami. And that's, at the time, I was living there as well, and also noticing different things, noticing how many gas stations there were, noticing food was not as available as some of the other places that I grew up. And so that was kind of where I started asking myself, like, oh, what is this food scarcity thing? Oh, what is this about the soot and things that I'm seeing on the ground because there's a cement plant close by. So that kind of started me thinking about the intersections of these things of Black and Brown youth and environmental contaminants. And so when I moved on to the YWCA, that is where I really got a chance to kind of be more in communities, talk to folks about what they're experiencing, and learn about the historic issues around how communities are specifically situated in areas with the most pollution. And so throughout my career working in education spaces, I saw it a lot more. I started to see the younger children being impacted, higher rates of asthma. And I would say reading Heather McTeer-Toney's book, Before the Streetlights Come On, is when that things clicked for me. So I'm experiencing these things. I'm working with the children. I'm working with families, but the light bulb didn't go off for me until I read her incredible work and started to see like, oh, this is what this is. It is social justice, but it's also environmental justice that we're experiencing these things in these specific places.
Absolutely. And I wonder if you can go a little deeper into some of the experiences, either from your own life and your own kind of growing up and raising, to the experiences you've named in terms of being in Liberty City and sort of being with the Miami community that really show the impacts of air and water pollution. Because I don't know that a lot of people don't think about how air and water pollution impacts young children. And so I just wonder if you might share a story or a moment from your experience that would help people to understand more clearly.
Absolutely. So while I was living in Miami, I also lived in Overtown, which is a historic neighborhood. And right next to my house was this beautiful park, Dorsey Park. It's a historic park as well, related to baseball and Black folks in baseball. And I also am someone who experiences breathing issues, and I have in the past. So I would go to that park all the time, walk around, and notice that sometimes my chest would get tight. And I would feel like these kind of symptoms. I'm like, what's going on? It's a nice day. I'm not understanding it. Well, next to this park is a cement plant. And so a lot of the kids in the neighborhood, I would also notice they're coughing, right, at a younger age. They are having the residue on their clothes. And so I'm thinking, if I am experiencing this at my age, what could it be possibly doing to children? And doing the research, I found that over 6 million children have child onset asthma due to different kinds of air pollutants. And so in this neighborhood, there was an increase of childhood asthma, maybe due to this plant, maybe due to some other contaminants in the air, but it's directly related to air pollution in Miami. That's one story. I think the other thing that really brought it home for me was around food and water. So going to a community garden and realizing that we have the water that we have. Right. And so we're doing this thing to try to increase food security, to get folks what they need, but then thinking about, is this water coming from runoff from some kind of chemical plant, right? What is that doing to the soil and to the plant? And having to have that conversation with young children, because they're asking questions like, I thought we weren't supposed to drink this water. We had to boil this water, but we're using it for the plants. So it's definitely stuck with me every time that I have to be in a space with a community, with children, and they're going to ask those questions because they're wondering, why is this happening here? Why is there so much trash here and not in other places?
Absolutely. And that is the wonderful characteristic of children, right? Is they are going to ask the questions. And so I wonder, in maybe your answering of the questions quite literally to children, or in your answering of the questions, just in the work that you're doing, how you explain the role or the relationship of environmental racism to clean air and clean water and the advocacy that's necessary there.
Yeah, I think one of the ways I think about it and how I talk about it when I'm working with families and children and even educators is to think about our own human health and the health of the earth, right? So we have a body and the earth also has a body. And so when we get injured, we hope that we can rely on the medical system to support us. But what if that system actually doesn't see us as people? What if that system doesn't like us for some reason? Then that injury is going to get worse and we're going to have emotion about that. So we could be angry. We could act out. We're going to have more and more symptoms because we're not getting the help we need. And the same is true with the environment, because the environment and our earth has had injuries. It's displaying symptoms, and those symptoms affect us. It's causing more natural disasters. It's causing actually the actual pollutants to be amplified by these different factors. So I will talk about it usually by talking about the body and relating that to the earth, and then saying that some people unfortunately have biases against us. They don't like us, and it's not our fault. It's not something we can do anything about. So what we can do is become citizen scientists. We can notice our environment. We can take some power in our own hands to say, these are the things that are happening to me, to catalog those, to document those, and also to think about the good things in our environment. Both of those things. What do we appreciate about our block? What do we appreciate about the trees and the lot next door? What do we appreciate about the birds that we see on a day-to-day basis? And that's part of resistance, because a part of this environmental racism is having us feel less than, and not having that clean air and that clean water. It's an internal thing that's happening, but it's also an external signal of worthiness. And so combating that, I think, honestly, I don't have it all figured out. It's something I still struggle with. That's one of the ways that I'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I love the language of citizen scientists. I think that is such a beautiful way to sort of center autonomy and agency in what can often, many of the systems feel this way, but I think this is one of those areas where a lot of people just feel kind of at a loss. They really don't know where to start and then what to do. And so I wonder if we might go just kind of a step further into how systemic choices expose children and families to toxins. So I'm thinking specifically around what we know to be true is that Black children are more likely to live, learn, and play near highways and factories, in areas where there are unsafe water systems, as you mentioned. And so, yeah, how do we sort of understand, explain those systemic choices and how they expose children and families to toxins?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a student, I'll say I'm a student of this, of the research of this and the history of this. But what I do know is that a lot of it has to do with redlining as well. So communities were moved into areas that had more factories, or a community was already there and they put a highway through it. A lot of Black business areas, Miami is one of these places, that was a thriving metropolitan area, and they put a highway right through that. And so people are still living in that space. And so I think the systemic aspect is just as we do with the earth, when we see a vibrant community or we see something beautiful, unfortunately, the capitalist kind of mindset that is not care based will say, we want to capitalize on that. We see something good. what can we build on top of it? That's a way to grow. It's similar to gentrification. When you have a thriving neighborhood, that's when it's going to become developed. And I put that in quotes, developed. A lot of the authenticity is snatched away from that. So it's similar, I think, with these environmental issues. You have companies that see a space that they can exploit for a lot of different, usually a lot of times these are beautiful spaces. They're spaces that have a lot of resources. And so they're moving in and disregarding the people. And I think that it's an idea that not only are the folks in our communities less valuable in the mind of these companies, but that no one will say anything. And that there's this silence there that is expected, and that we must continue to trouble with our stories, with our activism, with our advocacy, and just with standing up against it and living our lives with joy and resilience regardless.
Listening to Binta, I'm reminded that clean air and water are not luxuries, are rights. And yet, for too many Black children, these basic needs are threatened by pollution and neglect. But communities and Black practitioners are also teaching us another truth, that care, culture, and collective action can transform systems. When we gather in communal imagination, when we breathe, connect with nature, and tell our stories, we are practicing resilience and world building. These acts are not only resistance, they are acts of liberation, rooted in joy and the belief that every Black child deserves to thrive fully. So I have 2 follow-up questions because you made 2 really important points that I want to ensure our audience is able to kind of unpack with you. And so the first question I'm going to ask you goes along with the fact you made about capitalism, right? And this sort of notion of we will build on top of whatever, quite literally whomever, to make money, and gets us into artificial intelligence and the rapid pace of development at which we're seeing artificial intelligence and data banks, for example, be put into certain communities. And so I know this is a newer conversation, but just wondered if you have any early insights, any thoughts you might share in terms of like, what do we need to know about the environmental cost of AI?
That's another thing that I'm still learning about. But what I do know and what I see like within the pattern is it's very similar to industrial agriculture. So we're going into an area, we're using the water, right? Because these data centers also use water. They use electricity. So they're taking resources from the earth, from the communities, and not giving anything back. So not only are they taking land and space where we could build homes for folks. We know we have a huge issue with housing here, where there could be a park, where there could be access for folks. And we're using it for something that is not only not regulated, but that we honestly, many people have very little understanding of, but it's being driven so fast without any kind of ethics, without any kind of guardrails or regulations. So I think to me, it feels very much like the 90s when these different animal packing plants were coming up. People see an opportunity to make a lot of money, and they don't think about what it requires to do that. And I think it's because, similar to the internet, with things that are technology based, we don't see how they work. So it's easy to just be disconnected from it. And similar, if you live in a city, you might not see how, the chicken gets to you or all these different things get to you. But there's the folks who are living on the ground in these areas that can really say the most and tell the stories about what they're seeing in their daily life. What I do know is that these plants and AI data centers take an astronomical amount of water and energy, and that's not being accounted for. And folks are not being in any way compensated or oftentimes even told that this is going to happen.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it in that it's this sort of, it's unseen for the most part. So we're just kind of, it's on our phones, we plug up our computers, it's there. But the back end, like really understanding what the there is and where it's coming from is something that we're still learning about. I know that there are some communities that are fighting against these data systems or data banks being put in their communities. And so wanting to pick up a little bit on that, point and thinking about our audience and educators and the role of educators and advocates and caregivers in general, what role do you think these folks can play in advocating for clean air and clean water?
I think that educators, first, I would say that caring for children is environmental justice because I think it's really important to remember that we're not caring for nature in some kind of vacuum. We have an intimate relationship with nature and we are a part of nature.
Mhm.
So I would want educators to know that the work that you are doing is supporting environmental justice. It's very valuable and that you have a say and you should have a voice in conversations about environmental justice because we know that very young children are most impacted by heat, by air quality, and by water. So these are the people that know if there's lead in a building, right? How that gets into the water. If there is chemicals, they can actually see, and they're with the children every day to see the impacts of these things. And they're with the families every day in these communities. So I think that you just doing your work and observing how you're seeing things unfold in a neighborhood, that can be a powerful advocacy tool. Writing down your story, documenting your story, using video, any way that you feel that confident enough to share what you're seeing, especially if you're in an area where they are trying to build one of these plants, or you're noticing that there's like an uptick in factory activity. That's an opportunity to share how you are seeing this, and hopefully impact others. I think that a lot of times we all want to do as much as we can.
Right.
And so I also want to make it like clear that like we don't always have to be the ones standing up or standing on the front lines. Sometimes it's just as simple as sharing the knowledge with someone else that you know. Talking about these pollutants, talking about water quality to someone else can be valuable. But just caring for children in the way that you do, I think, is also extremely valuable. And for parents, I think it's asking questions when you can. Asking about when if you go to a city council meeting, or if you are engaging with some corporation that's in your neighborhood, asking those questions, like how do you manage your energy here? Like how do you store the things that we're buying here? So making sure that you're as aware as possible without putting so much pressure on you, because we know that as caregivers and as educators, there's so much that we're already holding. So I just want to say, like, you're doing enough now, and any other step of sharing your story, sharing your experience is working towards our collective goal.
Absolutely. And I love that point of reassurance. I mean, we at NBCDI talk a bit about climate anxiety and the sort of notion that there are so many issues, right? We've actually committed ourselves to what we call our 8 essential outcomes. And any one of those feels like it could take a lifetime to try to make real for Black children. And so when we think about asking caregivers, whether you're caregiving in the role as an educator and or as a parent or guardian, any way that you're caring for children, it can feel like kind of piling on climate is like one more really big thing that can bring a lot of anxiety, and folks feel some nervousness about, well, what really can I do about that? So I want to actually ask you this question that turns it a little bit on its head, because I know we've talked so far about the ways in which specifically clean air and clean water negatively impact children. And so I want to kind of turn it to, how do we understand or talk about how climate is related to children flourishing and really children being able to thrive?
Yes. Well, this makes me think about relationship. So we know that having wonder and joy in nature is one of the things that helps children to thrive and to flourish. So, and I think this could be for children and educators and caregivers, spending time outside, trying to find opportunities to be out in clean, in open air, to be with the water, to show that appreciation for yourself and for the environment by spending time in a local park or taking a little bit of a trip outside the city if possible. But even just where you are, going outside, seeing what you see in the sky, the clouds, the birds. Taking that time, no matter where you are physically, helps to build that wonder and to keep that relationship. And I think that's what's needed for us to not only care about environment and future, but to feel resourced in ourselves. Because for me, the other aspect about the well-being part of air and water is that when we're regulated in ourselves, we're able to have a lot more energy to think about other fights, to think about other ways we can advocate. But if we are not having that experience, if we're not giving to ourselves, then that's harder to do. So I think spending time in the water, spending time around water, we know actually research shows that that can have a calming effect on us, that hearing nature sounds affects our well-being and our mental health. So and I think about, icons like Rue Mapp and Outdoor Afro, who have for many years, like taking people out into nature. So finding something for you that feels accessible, that can connect you to nature, I think is one of those easy but also wonderful ways to see the benefits of air and water.
Absolutely. I love that. And you're right. I mean, it feels like you feel so good when you are able to find some time and space in nature. And I just wondered if you might say something about one of the most important elements or inhabitants of outside are our birds. Yet we don't really think much about birds. We talk more about trees. We're even starting to talk more about grass and green space and how important those natural resources are to us as human beings. But I wonder, as someone who I know is a fan and a lover of birds, if you might help us understand, maybe even be reminded a bit of the importance of birds and our relationship to and with birds.
Sure. Well, that makes me smile because I'm like, I would say a novice birder, but I have had an affinity for birds all my life. My grandmother used to like sit on the back porch, point at birds and she would know so many different things about them. And I would say, ask your grandmas, because a lot of grandmas are like citizen scientists. Okay. So she was definitely those. And so the cardinal was a bird that I always loved seeing, and it was always around all through the year. And I noticed, oh, all the other birds leave. This one is here. And so as a young child, and this is something I love to do with children's too, is like, what birds do you notice in this season? But the thing that I love about birds, and also something that is a little challenging, is that we're losing a lot of birds.
Okay.
And due to pesticides, and specifically neonicotinoids, and those same chemicals impact young children.
Okay.
So because noticing birds helps us, and noticing what's impacting them actually helps us to notice what's impacting young children. So that's a point that I want to bring out, but also that no matter where we are, whether we're in a big city, whether we're in the country, whether we're somewhere in between, birds are going to find us because they're going to find us and they're going to be there. And so even noticing what birds aren't there as often can be a great experiment for kids, just to build that curiosity. But I think about the different qualities of birds. Hearing a bird kind of like always brings me joy. I'm thinking about like, what bird is that? It's up in the sky. It's got that feeling of inspiration of flying. So many songs that we have in the Black community reference birds, talk about flying, talk about the resilience or the beauty of our songs, the uniqueness of our songs. So I think that birds and humans have a really special connection throughout history and historically, and also today. I think that noticing a little bit more and spending time with them helps to build that wellness still. There's actually someone, Tama Watts, who is a well-being bird specialist. So she works with people around birds and wellness. So there's so many ways that just noticing birds, taking time in nature to build that slow process of even with your eyes, you don't have to have binoculars or anything, just going outside, looking up to the sky, just helps to build that peace and that inner quiet that is honestly missing a lot. And for a lot of us, I don't know, for me, I enjoy those moments.
Absolutely.
But for children, it helps them, and that calming, that self-regulation, to know that they can have something that they can do, and to hopefully breathe easier when they're spending time with birds.
Oh, thank you. I feel like you just talking about birds brought some calm to my spirit. And I loved what you said about so many of our songs and our traditions, birds are included. So I immediately started to think about His Eye is on the Sparrow as a song that I definitely grew up listening to and trying to sing along to. And it also makes me think about what I know is a subject that we both love, which is Afrofuturism, and how this idea of flying off to a new and different and better world is part of the Afrofuturist theory, philosophy, and approach. And so I'm wondering how you sort of bridge Afrofuturism and like an Afrofuturist approach to environmental justice work.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of birds, the Sankofa symbol
Absolutely.
is one that I know that many of us know and love. And it's one that I've connected to through the Afrofuturism Collective in a different way of thinking about it as a technology, right? We think a lot about AI and different other, but there are ancestral technologies that we use something and to bring something from the past to kind of dismantle it a little bit, to pull it apart, to think about, does it still work? Does what great grandma still did, does that still work today? Taking the jewels and the gems, thanking our ancestors, and then moving it to the present with what we know. That is a beautiful technology. And I think that's the approach to environmental justice that we're taking through our collective, which is to bring our different backgrounds from the diaspora, from Ghana, from Kenya, from Trenton, New Jersey, from, North Carolina and San Diego, and think about what are the things that we inherently have in our culture as Black folks. What is maybe not working anymore? Like, we know that maybe we need to get outside more, like, using these particular chemicals or this particular spray to clean isn't really working, but what can work? And then moving that forward through our stories, through our art. So writing fiction, writing the biggest, like most joyful possibility, but also kind of collecting the stories of now, right? I think Afrofuturism is also about us today, what we see, the conversations that we have that shift something in us and in our community. So having a conversation about plastics, with your family or with your community, that's to me an Afrofuturist endeavor to say, like, look, I know we want to keep all these things and we're reusing. That's great because Black folks in our communities are really great at reusing things. We have the recycling thing pretty much down. But how then do we move into, greener products, right? Different things that are going to be nourishing us for the future. So I think that's in some ways the approach. And I think it's also thinking about different ways to reach out. So if a song is going to reach a young person more than a report, let's do that. Let's have more climate-based songs, more environmental justice-based songs. If a poem is, and dance is, what are all the different ways? Because arts and science, they are in constant communication. And so a lot about this is, let's not make these borders that separate and kind of keep us siloed. Let's blend the science with the art, with the speculation to find something that is both joyful and maybe a big goal, but something we can then work towards.
I love that. I want to ask you, in putting on your Afrofuturist hat, I don't know that that's a hat that ever comes off, but we're continuing to wear your Afrofuturist hat. You would go into the future with me and with our audience for a little bit and just maybe talk about the future of environmental policy and what you might design for Black children. What could that look like?
Oh, I think it would be one led by young people and by educators. I see many circles of educators, of caregivers, of children sitting together and thinking about what is the person with the least amount of what we're going to say power, but let's just say, what is the person who has the most need in this situation? What do they need? And then rippling that out to everyone. I think for me, it's less about what technologies we use and what frameworks we use to think about caring for each other. So for me, an environmental just future is one where everyone's needs are considered and that we come up with solutions that really honor the complexity, the beauty of our cultures, that we also think about different movements. So think about disability justice. We think about the intersections that we experience and that we could remain curious. We remain curious. We're not too rigid about what works and what doesn't work because that changes over time. So I think that it's a future where everyone has access to clean air and clean water and everyone has access to the kinds of freedom of ideas and imagination to dream even bigger than that.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I feel like I just need to pause for a second. This has been such a beautiful and nourishing conversation. And really just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I just really want to underline what you just said around environmental justice being where everyone's needs are met. Environmental justice is child justice. Every child deserves to grow up breathing clean air, drinking safe water, and living in a community free from toxic harm. So here's the invitation. Learn what environmental issues affect your community. Join or support organizations that are already fighting for change. Engage children in conversation about nature, wellness, and justice so they see themselves as part of the solution. And please don't forget to look up into the sky and see what birds you might see flying over your head and really, really, really love and enjoy those birds. Together, we can world build futures where Black children breathe freely, thrive fully, and experience joy in communities rooted in love and possibility. Thank you to our guest, Binta Dixon, for her vision and her leadership. Say That With Love is a podcast from the National Black Child Development Institute. This episode was created with our ABF creative production team and our partners, and with love for the communities that inspire this work. And to Black children everywhere, we love you unapologetically and out loud. I am Dr. Leah Austin. Thank you for listening.